Welcome back, everybody. Today we're going to be installing a set of unibody stiffeners onto the Resurrection Cherokee. For those of you who have been following along with this series from the beginning, and for those of you who are Cherokee owners yourselves, then this video probably doesn't come as a surprise. You're probably expecting it sooner than later. These Cherokees are tried and true off-road machines. Thousands upon thousands of these boxy, inefficient, and underpowered vehicles have proven their incredible off-road capabilities for the past almost 5 decades. They have a long list of flaws, yet people like you and I absolutely adore them. One of these flaws is arguably a pretty big one, and today we're gonna address that. Today we are installing unibody stiffeners. When the Cherokee XJs were released, one of the biggest complaints, and it still is today, was that they have a unibody instead of a frame. Because of this, they are very prone to flexing, like the body, the entire Jeep. This becomes very noticeable while off-road. If you've ever parked a Cherokee on a noticeably uneven surface, say you're flexing on a decent sized rock while off-road to get a photo, you've probably noticed it becomes tough to open the rear hatch, or in some cases even the doors. Never mind if you do get them open, never mind trying to close them. This is because the Cherokee's unibody allows a lot of flexing, a lot more than I and just about every Cherokee owner is comfortable with. The most common fix, I guess we can call it a fix, is welding on unibody stiffeners. And today we are going to do just that. So as you all already know, we are working on the unibody stiffeners today. A big piece to this weird Jeep puzzle that we got going on here. Then again, everything that we've been doing is a big piece of the puzzle. I just finished last video and I went right into the unibody stiffeners. I already got some work done today, as you saw in some of those previous clips. Let me show you exactly where I'm at. So this Jeep already has front stiffeners. I did those about 3 years ago. So right now we're working on mid stiffeners, and then maybe later, I'm not sure exactly what we're gonna get done in this video, but we'll be working on the rear. So I've got this side, this is the driver's side. I've got the mids right here. These are all basically where they need to be. And honestly, they're fitting really good. I'd say they're fitting as expected. I've had to do a little bit of work to them here and there, but overall, they're fitting really nicely. So these are barn stiffeners. On the front here, I had to cut a little bit out of them because on the front, they were just squared off. I'm sure that would have been fine if these front ones were barns, but these fronts are actually from Hooligan Off-Road. But not a big deal, I just had to cut a little bit out of it. Same thing over here, I cut this slit in it just to get it to fit up into the unibody a little bit better. And then down here underneath of this piece, I actually had to make this piece its own piece. This was actually connected to this front piece to begin with. And because of where my transfer case skid mounts to on the unibody, I had to notch this piece for these 2 bolt holes on either side. Then this rear piece, I didn't really have to do much work to it. I think I took a little bit off of here where it also was gonna get in the way of that transfer case skid plate mounting location. And then in the back, I just took a little bit off of the side here, kind of where it meets this leaf spring mount. But yeah, we're gonna worry about the front, this front piece over here, and then we'll jump onto this piece. I got them all up here just to make sure they were gonna line up and everything was gonna fit where it needed to. You can see for the front, I kind of based everything off of this hole in the unibody. That hole is there for if you get the Jeep towed on a flatbed from like a tow truck company. They'll usually stick their chain into here to hold it down onto the tow truck. So that's why these stiffeners account for that hole. For the rear here though, I noticed that this hole actually does not line up. If I were to push that forward, it would interfere with these pieces up front. So that's really not that big of a deal. It gives us more to weld to right here, so that's kind of a plus. But for this rear piece, I was basing it off of where this piece meets right here. I wanted a little gap so I can fill that in with weld. And then there's some holes down here. There's actually one big one down here at the end and then one right here. Those line up perfectly along actually with this same tow truck, I guess what we can call it, a tow truck hole. This one down here lines up perfectly as well. It's just this one for some reason, but like I said, it's not really that big of a deal. These stiffeners also fit pretty nicely up here against the floor. You can see it's kind of got a lip where it bends up and goes onto the floor. There is a gap in some spots, but that's totally
fine. We're just gonna take a heavy hammer and hit it up, and then we'll be able to weld it to that. Overall, I'd say I'm pretty happy with them. Let's take a look at these on the bench. I've got the other side up on the bench over here. So here's that front mid stiffener that we were just looking at down there. But this one is for the passenger side, but it is the same exact piece, just mirrored to this side. So down there on the driver's side, this is the piece that is now its own piece here on the end. And then around somewhere over here is where I had to make that other slit just to get it to fit a little better. The front, like I said, I just had to cut a little bit off right here to meet up with that front stiffener. And other than that, this fits really nicely. I should have already said it, but these are from Barnes 4-wheel drive. Barnes saw what we were doing to the Resurrection Cherokee, and they wanted to be a part of it. So they sent me over these stiffeners. Incredibly grateful for that. This is really gonna speed up the process of getting the Resurrection Cherokee back out onto the trail. Otherwise, I probably would have attempted to make these, and I definitely could have, but it would have taken a long time. In the future, I would love to attempt to make some Cherokee Unibody stiffeners. So anyways, on the driver's side, these are fitting very well. There are a few other modifications that we're gonna have to make though, due to the long arm setup that we're running on the Cherokee. The long arm setup that we're running on the Resurrection Cherokee is something we custom fabricated about 3 years ago, and it's been doing great ever since. Because of how I designed that cross member down there for the long arms, I was kind of worried going into this that that long arm setup wasn't going to work anymore because of how it wraps up onto the unibody down there, onto the sides of the unibody. But after getting one of those pieces off for that cross member and holding it up against this unibody stiffener, there's not gonna be a problem. I really don't think so. Our long arm cross member down there is made of 3 pieces. 2 side pieces that bolt to either side of the unibody, and then a center section. It's made like that in case we have to service the, say, the transmission, the transfer case. We can remove that center section of the cross member to remove the tranny, transfer case, whatnot, without having to mess with your suspension. If that cross member was all one piece, every time you had to do a transmission job, you'd have to drop your suspension as well, which would be a big pain. So I think the only problem we're gonna have, these unibody stiffeners are 3/16 inch thick, so it's gonna end up bumping out both of those side pieces of the cross member 3/16 of an inch on either side, which means our center section is probably gonna be too short now. So that's really not that big of a deal. That center section, it was very easy to make. Oh shoot, I'm gonna have to make a new transfer case skid plate too, actually. I didn't even think of that. That's actually too bad. Maybe I can use some spacers or something. I don't know. We'll see once we get there. So I didn't even think of that transfer case skid plate. Shoot. Maybe we'll do a whole underbelly skid and we won't even worry about that piece. It's gonna take a long time. Something else to the list, I guess. Anyways, Barnes has this big cutout right here in the center of this front mid stiffener. This is so this piece will not interfere with your cross member, whether it be stock or probably aftermarket. Although this cutout is going to mess with the setup that we're running. So I think the fix of this, I mean, we could put spacers, but I think the fix of this is just to cut out a piece of 3/16 this size. We can probably do it on the CNC and then just weld it in here. It'll make it more rigid, so I'm not really complaining. I also have more holes than stock that hold on my cross member. I think on each side, I think it's like 6 or 8 half-inch bolts that hold on my cross member on each side, which is definitely overkill, but we're gonna have to figure out where those holes go on here so we can drill them. There are a few that have to go up here as well, up here on the side that is. So I think the next step is to figure out where those holes go, get this piece cut out and welded in, and start cleaning up the unibody so we can get these tacked on. So here's that piece that I just finished getting put into place. We're about to tack it into place right now. I already did a test fit with the unibody stiffener under the Jeep with this piece, and we have 2 bolt holes that are gonna be right here. So this is plenty of room for those, and then we got another one right over here. My long arm cross member has the ability to be held on by 4 half-inch bolts on the bottom side. There's this one, there's 2 right here, and then 1 right here, although we'll probably end up only using 1 of these. So this one, you can see I kind of marked it. I'm gonna have to probably drill it out and then wallow it out some more. But anyways, this piece is looking really good. You can see I ground down the edges of the unibody stiffener and the piece, just so we can get this filled in with weld really nice, and then we can grind it down and you won't even know it's a separate piece. So I'm gonna get this tacked on. I'm gonna test fit it up on the Jeep, make sure everything looks good, and then I'll go ahead and weld that up. I'll probably fix this hole, make sure everything else lines up, and then maybe I'll do the same to the other side.
Y'all already know at this point, I like to tack stuff on and check it about a dozen times to make sure there are no fitment issues. This newly modified stiffener now fit great. It's gonna work for my application very well. So I proceeded to find out exactly where the 3 side bolt holes for the long arm bracket need to be, got those drilled out, and we were in business. So I've got all of the mid stiffeners for the driver's side all fitted up. I also got my long arm kit. This is my long arm bracket for the driver's side. It's basically the same bracket
bracket on both sides. This one is all fitted on. It's looking like it's gonna work just fine. Like I said earlier, I think we're just gonna have to remake a new cross member to tie the two together, and that's really not that big of a deal. But yeah, this is fitting really good. That piece that I made looks really nice. I'll show you all that once I take it out. And then we've got that small piece that's fitted just fine. And then this rear piece really did not need any more work. It's fit really nice and it's butted up right against the unibody.
Next step is to clean up that unibody. There's a few ways I think I can go about this. 2 ways, that is. The first being the usual method that I've done in the past, where I just take a paint marker and go all the way around the stiffeners and basically mark the unibody where it has to be cleaned. But I'm gonna try the second method. I'm gonna take this weld-through primer and put a light coat across the unibody stiffeners, and wherever I see this on the unibody, I'll know that's where I have to be cleaning. Now, I've never done that, but I'm gonna try to give that a shot.
Now, before you get any ideas, don't do what I just said. The paint idea did not work as well as I thought it would. I decided to leave that in the video though, so y'all can learn from my mistakes. What you're gonna wanna do, and what I ended up doing, is cleaning absolutely everywhere. Clean the unibody off completely, everywhere the stiffeners are going to be covering. The paint idea, it was a good thought, but looking back, it was just a waste of time. Everything should be cleaned. In my opinion, and after talking with others who have done the same thing, this is the correct way to do this. So for the next couple hours, what felt like an eternity, I cleaned up this unibody, the mid section of the unibody. This is not a fun job. I really need to invest in a lift so I don't have to do jobs like this laying on a creeper. But for that, I need a bigger shop and so on. I'm sure a lot of y'all feel my pain. I will say though, I'm very fortunate enough to have this beautiful shop to work in. I could be doing this on the gravel outside in the dark. We'll upgrade one day, one step at a time.
That was incredibly messy. I just finished sanding down the driver's side along with the passenger side. I'm literally gonna have to take a shower after this. There was a lot of material on this unibody that had to come off. I will tell you though, this sound deadening material I put on the Jeep about 3 years ago held up very well. Right now I forgot the name of the company, but I'll put it right here in the video. I'm gonna be using that same product when we go to paint the underneath of the Jeep again. When we had the Jeep torn apart about 3 or 4 years ago, we did floors, we ground and everything under the Jeep. This Jeep was down to a shell, and we used that stuff to go over all of the metal. The inside of the Jeep on the floors, the underside of the Jeep, everywhere on the unibody, literally everywhere. Even in the engine bay right here, when we had the engine out, we sprayed it on the firewall. That stuff works really good and it held up amazing. After everything I just ground down, I found just 2 small spots that were questionable. Looked like they were bubbling just a little bit. But honestly, I looked over the Jeep and I cannot find any other spots like that. Pretty good product in my opinion. Quiet sound the Jeep as well, that's its whole purpose. Anyways, I jumped onto that passenger side and ground down everything because I want to spray some weldable primer on this driver's side. I want to do that same thing to the passenger side now. Before I sprayed that, I wanted to get all the sanding done so there wasn't anything in the air sticking to the wet paint. So once I get the stiffeners fitted up on this side, I think we'll go ahead and we'll spray the weldable primer on the unibody. We'll spray it on the back side of the unibody stiffeners. We'll let that dry and then we'll be able to tack them on and weld them on. I don't know why we have to tack them really. As for taking off all of this material on the unibody, for the past couple weeks, I've been thinking of literally going to buy a sandblaster because I thought it was going to be very tough on the sanding disc and the grinding disc to be able to take off that material. But I will say, I only went through about 4 sanding discs and they did a great job. It was on there thick, but like I said, it did the job. The unibody is now down to bare metal where it needs to be. I will also say, I talked about only grinding down and sanding down the parts that needed to be welded, but I take that back. If you're gonna do this same job and do some unibody stiffeners, just clean up that whole unibody. You'll thank me later. So anyways, I'm gonna clean up a little in here. I'm gonna clean up myself a little bit. I'm gonna get those passenger side stiffeners fitted on and then we can get to painting and tacking.
I made the same modifications to the passenger side stiffeners as I did the drivers. The only thing that's different is I didn't have to notch out spaces for the transfer case skid bolt holes. I welded in the same piece we cut out on the CNC as well as drilled out the 3-link bracket holes. I cleaned off the unibody with some brake clean and then got to spraying the weldable primer on the unibody and the backside of the stiffeners. So it's been a couple hours and our weldable primer on the unibody and the stiffeners is all dry. It's actually the next day. Today I want to get these tacked onto the unibody of the Jeep. But I wanted to go a little in depth on how exactly I'm fitting these onto the unibody of the Jeep. I'm going to show you all my method. So a few things we've been using. We've been using this floor jack right here, just a common floor jack. Ideally, we would probably want 2 of them. It would make it a little easier, but one's fine. That's all we've got. Just in case it wasn't obvious, the floor jack is used to push the unibody stiffeners as tightly against the unibody as possible. And then from there, we need to clamp the unibody stiffeners onto the unibody. So that's what we use over here. I bought these nice C-clamps
These are Wilton. They're a pretty nice brand of C-clamp. These don't bend or anything. They do a pretty good job clamping the stiffeners onto the unibody. I also went and bought a few of these clamps. These are from Harbor Freight. These are absolutely terrible. When you try to tighten them down, they just spread apart, so they really don't do much. So maybe for smaller projects, these would be good, but for this, we're not gonna be using those. So like I said, I'm gonna show you all exactly how I've been fitting these onto the Jeep. We're gonna start with this driver side, this mid front stiffener. This one, so right here, I'll just take the floor jack. We're gonna press it as tightly as we possibly can against the unibody. Make sure it's lined up good. So we're gonna go right like that. Now we're gonna take one of our clamps and probably clamp either side, the front or the back of it. We're not gonna go super tight with that one yet. That's just to hold it up there. This is where 2 floor jacks would come in handy. So right now you can kind of see it came down. We're gonna go to the front of the unibody stiffener, push that up as high as we can. These holes, these 3 holes, are for my long arm cross member, the brackets that I drilled there. I'm just gonna put these bolts through there just to kind of hold this piece in the center where it needs to be. So we know that's roughly where it has to be. So now you can see we are super tight against the unibody up front here on the bottom and the top actually. So I'm gonna take this other C-clamp and clamp that really tight, and that's gonna be where that thing rests. Cool, so that didn't move at all, so that's good. So that is super tight against there. Now we're gonna bring this floor jack to the back and push up on the back. So you can't see on the back here, but it is touching the unibody right there. It's very tight up against it. Those holes still line up. So it looks like we're good to clamp it back here now. And then the last part on this piece specifically, since this piece is kind of its own, we're gonna do the same thing back here. We're just gonna press that up. And already, this is that slit that we cut in here. It's usually not there from Barnes. So already that piece is fitting really good. So we're gonna go ahead and put one last clamp on there. So that's tight up against the unibody right there. I'm gonna go ahead and get this tacked on. It fits really well actually. The one thing that you can see is kind of not lining up all that great is this top lip. But I think I said this earlier, we can either take the floor jack and press up on that, or we can take a heavy hammer and hit that up. I almost cut this upper lip off because most unibody stiffeners actually don't have that. But I ended up leaving it because I want to see how it comes out. I think with that lip, it's going to come out pretty good if we can get it tight up against the floor right there and the unibody. So I'm going to go ahead, get these tacked on, and then I'm going to work on the rest of them, get them tacked on as well. Before we go and fully weld them, I want to get the rear fitted on. We got to remove this rear bumper. We're going to get those rears fitted on, tacked on, then we can weld everything together.
Now, after a few welds, I decided there was no reason to tack these on, so I just went right for it and started fully welding them. The rears won't get in the way of these mids, so there's really no reason not to fully weld them up. I guess I could have jumped from the passenger side to the driver's to let each side cool down in between welds, but I think we'll be okay. This Jeep is not going to warp or twist any more than it already is. The upper lip on these unibody stiffeners where it meets the floor is going to make these stiffeners much more effective than if they were not to have it. This upper lip is a clear advantage over other companies' stiffeners that don't have it. I haven't seen any other companies that have this upper lip. If there are, let me know down in the comments below. I'd like to check them out. It is tough to weld it to the thin floor and unibody above, and in some spots I had to take my hammer and beat it to close up the gap between the two. It is not fun, but if you're willing to put in the extra work, these stiffeners are for sure worth it.
I have been at these stiffeners all day, and I finally just got the driver's side on the mids just about done. I kind of got a little carried away. I know I said I was gonna tack them all on to begin with, make sure everything fit fine, and then weld them all in. But I just went ahead and fully welded the driver's side mid all together. And I'm very happy with how it came out. Unibody stiffeners can be tough. There's a few spots on these, specifically that top seam where it meets the floor, that's pretty difficult to weld. For the most part, a lot of my welds came out very nice. There are a few in there that don't look all that great. It's very tough to weld that thin floor to these 3/16 unibody stiffeners. But like I said, for the most part, I'm I'm very happy with how it came out. Also, once this is all said and done, there's gonna be boat sides in the way, these mid stiffeners, so we're not even gonna be able to see them. Not to say they look bad. I think they look good, but we're not gonna be able to see the finished product in the end. Now, underneath of the unibody. In the past, it's been very tough for me to weld upside down. When I did the unibody stiffeners on my red Cherokee, you know, they didn't come out all that great on the bottom. That's something I've been wanting to do. Once the Resurrection Cherokee is done, I want to pull the red Cherokee back in here and kind of fix a few things on it, the stiffeners being one of them. Just make it look a little better, if you will. But the stiffeners on the Resurrection Cherokee, they came out absolutely amazing on the bottom. Every single weld down there looks really good. So I'm very happy about that. I should also note, if you're gonna do unibody stiffeners, you need to stitch weld them. There is no reason to go crazy with your welder. You do not need to fill in every single spot with weld. Just pinch weld it, go 1 or 2 inches here, leave 1 or 2 inches, weld another 1 or 2 inches, and do that for just about everywhere. I did that on that inner lip, I did that up where it meets the floor. There is no reason to fill absolutely everything in with weld. I'm gonna go pick up some seam sealer, and everywhere I didn't end up welding those 1 or 2 inches, I'm gonna be putting some seam sealer so we don't have any water intrusion. Doing this has worked very well for me in the past. I just finished the passenger side mid stiffeners. This side came out absolutely amazing. The other side did come out awesome, but this side, every single weld looks awesome. There is one that didn't come out all that great, but I'll explain that once we're down there looking at it.
Like I said, just about every single weld on this side came out awesome. Other than there's one right here on the back corner. The unibody is very thin right there, and it's right near this hole as well. This area is right where 2 thin pieces of metal for the unibody meet together, and it's right near this hole, which means over the past 25 years or so, since this Jeep's been driving on the road, water has been coming into this hole and staying in there, and it makes moisture in that hole. So there's no doubt in my mind there's a little rust inside of that hole, making that sheet metal very, very thin. So this weld kind of burned through a little bit, but we're gonna grind this down. We won't even know it's there. Same thing with this corner. On the other side, I ground it down just so it looked a little nicer. I'm gonna do that right there. You can also see all of these little plug welds on the unibody. They give you these little holes on the bottom side here, and I'm gonna grind those down just like on the other side. I think the only welds I won't grind down are these little stripes here, I guess you can call them, the lines that we put welds in. I think I'm gonna keep those. So yeah, all the welds came out really nice. I'm really happy with this side. All of the welds going onto the floor here came out absolutely amazing. As for this lip, if I were to give Barnes a suggestion, I know they're not asking me for any suggestions, but if they were to ask me for a suggestion or my thoughts, I would say they should put some relief cuts in this upper lip. That upper lip where the unibody stiffener meets the floor, or the unibody in some spots. On this back one, I actually put my own relief cuts, and I used a very heavy hammer to hit it up towards the floor, because the floor isn't totally flat. It's a little wavy in some spots. That way we can get that stiffener really close to the floor or the unibody itself, so it makes for a good weld. So without those relief cuts, actually this front piece, I didn't end up putting the relief cuts or the other side, and it was very, very tough to bang up with that heavy hammer, bang that unibody stiffener up to meet the floor. Given this side was already pretty close, so that was good. This one was pretty far, that's why I put those relief cuts in there, and it made it easier to bang up with a hammer. So that would be my suggestion if anyone asked. Other than that, I'm incredibly happy with these. I think they came out awesome, and they're gonna serve their purpose, which is to stiffen up this unibody. I should also note, even this inner lip or the underside, all the welds come out awesome. I guess I've gotten good at welding upside down, because I remember doing stiffeners on my red Cherokee probably about 5 or 6 years ago, and I remember welding the underside was an absolute pain. But these came out awesome. I wouldn't be afraid of letting anyone go under there and check out my welds. Anyways, I'm gonna worry about grinding the side later on. We're gonna jump on the rear right now. I think the rear is gonna be a little more straightforward. Now for the rear, we've got 2 pieces that need to be welded onto each side of this unibody. Originally, my thought process when I got to these rear stiffeners, I wanted to remove this bumper. This was a bumper I began fabricating actually on the channel. You can go back probably to one of my first couple videos where I started to fabricate this bumper, probably almost 2 years ago. There's 2 very old videos on the channel where I started doing that. And as you can see, I never finished the project. We kind of got carried away with Jake's TJ and the Resurrection Cherokee. This bumper was definitely overbuilt. The 2 mounting locations on the unibody are made out of 1/4 inch, and the rest of it is made out of 3/16. All of the skins and whatnot. It's a dual swing out. It's able to carry our spare tire, which was the 35 at the time, along with our knockoff Max Tracks and a Roto Packs.
I just never finished it, and now I want to go a different route. So I was going to take that off before we did the rear stiffeners, but I think we're just going to leave that for later, and we're going to jump onto the rear stiffeners now. So like I said, we've got two pieces on each side of this unibody. Right here, we're on the passenger side. We've got this small piece. This piece has to go somewhere right here. And by looking at it, it's gonna need some modifications. Over here on the left is gonna have to be modified, as well as the underneath right here. So we're gonna be getting to that, but other than that, that's a nice small piece, so it shouldn't be too hard. And then we've got these giant pieces that go behind that one, somewhat right here. But you can see, we have a slight problem back here. So in the back of the Resurrection Cherokee, this was actually a video as well. I installed some Shackle relocation brackets on the rear of the Cherokee. And obviously they're gonna get in the way of the unibody stiffeners. So we could either make modifications to the unibody stiffeners so they don't interfere, or we could remove the brackets, do the unibody stiffeners, then reinstall them. I don't think I'm gonna remove those brackets, because that may bring up an issue of centering this axle, and I don't wanna mess with that. So we're just gonna make some modifications to the unibody stiffeners back there, and they should fit just fine. Anyways, enough talking, let's get to work.
These rear stiffeners fit really well. They're shaped really nicely to the contour of the unibody. They just needed a little bit of modifications here and there to be perfect. Now I did have to cut out a decent amount of the stiffeners in the rear on both sides to clear those Shackle relocation brackets. So technically I don't have stiffeners in the back. I'm not too concerned. Eventually, hopefully we can put some coilovers in the rear of this Jeep, and I'll throw some metal back there then. Same thing goes for when I have the gas tank out in the future. I'm gonna make some inner stiffeners going all the way to the back of the Jeep. I'm gonna be doing that sooner than later, so expect a video on that in the near future. We need to make sure the rear of this Jeep is stiffened up real well. That goes for the entire Jeep. So I'm gonna be adding my own stiffeners anywhere I see fit.
I've got the rear unibody on the Jeep all cleaned up now, and I've got both sides, both sets of stiffeners. We got them over there on the ground. They're all fitted up and ready to be welded on once we get this painted. I'm gonna go ahead in a second and spray some weldable primer on the back sides of those unibody stiffeners, as well as the unibody over here on both sides. But yeah, I thought the axle and the suspension back here was gonna get in the way, maybe even the gas tank, but it looks like we should be in luck. If anything, right here, this leaf spring was gonna get in the way, but I don't think it's worth it to take it out. It's really not all that in the way. If I can't get to some welds over here and it ends up being a problem, then I'll take it out. I guess it's really not that big of a deal. But yeah, I ended up leaving this bracket in here, and we're just doing the unibody stiffener around the bracket. In the future, hopefully when we put coilovers in the rear of this, not in this series, but way down the road, we can take this bracket right off. It's not welded, it's just bolted on, and then we can make some plates and some stiffeners to go back there. Same thing goes for next time I have this gas tank out. I'll probably put some unibody stiffeners on the inside of the frame back here. The unibody, not the frame. But I think what we're doing back here right now, just on the outside, is gonna be plenty. It's gonna definitely be better than not having any stiffeners. So yeah, that's all cleaned up. I hit that unibody with some non-chlorinated brake cleaner. I did the same with the unibody stiffeners, and now I'm gonna spray some weldable primer on them. Then we can get to welding these on and wrapping up this project. The last step to this entire progress, and I kind of hinted at it before and I forgot until right now, is going to be to seam seal everywhere that we didn't weld on these stiffeners. Because like I said earlier, we don't want any water getting behind those stiffeners. We don't want any water intrusion. Because that would mean that we're gonna get rust behind those stiffeners in between the stiffener and the unibody, and we're gonna rust from the inside out. We definitely do not want that, so we're gonna be installing some seam sealer. This is the stuff I use. This stuff is from Dynatron, and it's just called Seam Sealer Gray. Dynatron number number 550 if that helps. I'm gonna put a link to this stuff down below. Although, I probably would not recommend this stuff. I get this stuff from AutoZone and it is incredibly expensive. I just went and bought this one bottle. It was the only bottle they had and it was $18. $18 before tax. I think it ended up being like $21. So this stuff works amazing. The seam sealer that I had on the Jeep I put on around 3 years ago, it was still on there and it still looked great. And this was the same stuff I used. So, I mean, it does its job, but it's just really expensive. I'm sure there's something very similar that is much cheaper. This entire bottle, I mean, I think we would probably need about 2 of these to do everything that we just did. Maybe one bottle would do it. If I do need any more, I'm gonna look on Amazon and see if I can find something similar but cheaper. And if I do find something, I'll let y'all know. Let me know what y'all use down in the comments below. I'm curious to see if there's something cheaper and just as good. Anyways, right after I went and got this and right before filming this section, I decided I'm not actually gonna install this right now. Because the next video that we see, literally right after I film this, I'm gonna start on it. I'm gonna be starting on the rock sliders and the boat sides. So I don't wanna end up installing the seam sealer anywhere that I'm just gonna have to wire wheel it back off. So we're gonna wait on this for right now. I'll probably wait to install that seam sealer right before we go to spray the underneath of this Jeep again. So it's probably gonna be a couple videos from now. Anyways, like I said, I am extremely excited. We're gonna be installing the rock sliders in next video. I'm gonna get to work on that right after this video. We're gonna be cutting out our rockers and installing some 2x6 rock sliders. And then in the video after that, we're gonna be installing some boat sides, some removable boat sides, which I'm very excited about. I've done something very similar to my red Jeep. It came out absolutely amazing. It is extremely strong, and in my opinion, it's the only way to do rock sliders and boat sides on the Cherokee. We're gonna be doing it a little different to the Resurrection Cherokee. We have to make a few modifications just because of the Knott's Custom fender flares on the Resurrection Cherokee. They're kind of gonna get in the way, but hopefully in the end, it all looks good. I just picked up all the metal for that. I'm excited to get to work on it. Anyways, thank you if you've made it to the end of this video. If you're gonna attempt to do some unibody stiffeners yourself, I hope this video helped you out a little bit. I wanna say thank you to Barnes for the unibody stiffeners. It definitely sped up the process of getting this Resurrection Cherokee back out onto the trail. They make a great unibody stiffener and they look amazing on the Resurrection Cherokee. But more importantly, they're gonna do their job, which is to stiffen up the unibody of the Cherokee. If you enjoyed the video and you haven't already, consider subscribing. Our entire goal this year is to hit 4,500 subscribers by the end of 2024. And I think we're right now like 700 something away. We are definitely ahead of schedule and I can't thank y'all enough for that. Also, be sure to follow us on Instagram. I post real-time updates for the Resurrection Cherokee there. All of these videos are roughly like a week and a half in advance. So if you follow us on Instagram, you'll be able to get real-time updates. And we're almost at 1,000 followers on Instagram, which is pretty cool. Anyways, I'm gonna keep this one short and simple for y'all. I'll see y'all on the trail and I'll see you next time.